Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Today I want to talk a little bit about the death of live music. This has a lot of context on YouTube, but I want to give you some of my personal experiences. For those of you who are new here or don't know my entire history, I was a gigging musician for about 10 years in the 2000s up through the early 2010s. And during that time, I saw a lot of booms and I saw some busts and I saw the entire landscape of music change, starting with the recording industry. The recording industry actually collapsed in the early 2000s. A lot of people who aren't in the business or who weren't there don't realize that that's what happened, but that is what happened. The value of recorded music basically went to zero when the prime demographic, which is going to be people between like that 12 to 24 age bracket or whatever, they stopped buying music. And they stopped buying music because they realized that they could just pirate it for free. When I was in college, even the music students never bought albums. They didn't buy CDs anymore. It was really rare for anyone to buy a CD. What people did is they got onto LimeWire, or before that, Napster, one of the music sharing sites, and they just downloaded whatever they wanted to for free. This includes people who were trying to make their business music. They never paid for music. Outside of the music department, I really met pretty much zero people who ever paid for music, with the exception of punks. People who were in the punk scene actually paid for music. That may seem a little weird to you, but it actually made sense to me because they had a really direct connection to the artists that they liked, and they really were the very early scene to be directly supporting artists and wanting to buy their things in order for them to have a living and go on tour and to be able to pay their bills and things like that. So most people that I knew, they didn't pay for music in terms of recordings. And the supposed rebuttal to that, it was even in South Park, was like, well, if people like their music, they'll still come to the concerts. Well, it turns out that that didn't really work out. There have been since then many, even, big acts who have quit the music business because there's no money in it. Certainly the midline acts that used to be support bands for various tours, they start having to drop out after a certain amount of time because you just can't make money in music. You're not selling any money with records. You still have to pay to produce the records because that's part of the business. And touring and selling merchandise and getting money at the door, it ends up not paying the bills. Once you have to pay all the other people that have to be paid, the band gets paid last. So the people who are the roadies, all of them, they have to get paid long before you in the band get to collect a paycheck. But there's something else that I noticed that happened over the years too, which is the interest that people had for live music started to go down and down and down and down over time. I used to gig like 4 nights a week, and in about 2008, whenever the housing crisis really took off, gigs just evaporated, right? Performance opportunities, especially paying performance opportunities, disappeared almost overnight. People lost a lot of money, and the economy was really, really bad for almost everyone. And because I was in California at the time, it was especially bad because they had a big boom and they had a big bust. People stopped going to restaurants, so places that would hire me to play classical guitar, that all disappeared within a couple of months. There was nobody hiring live music anymore. If you were in a band, you were pretty much on your own. You had to sell your own tickets and you had to figure out your own way for things. You weren't going to get paid by a bar. You probably weren't even going to be asked to play for like a cover. They weren't going to let people charge a cover. They needed people to get into the bar for free. So you could play for free at the bar and see if anybody wanted to donate money to you or sell CDs, but you weren't even making money from a cover, right? Like a cover charge would be like charge $5 for people to get in the door because there's a band playing. Pretty standard practice a while back, but that disappeared. Bars stopped doing that because they needed people to come in and buy alcohol, and they couldn't afford to pay a band a cover charge. If there was a $5 cover charge, people would go away. They just weren't interested in the live music. Whatever it was going to be, just people stopped being interested in it. And I noticed that people started complaining more and more, and whenever there was live music, it was too loud, it wasn't the kind of music they liked, they just weren't interested in it. People became a lot more plugged into whatever music they were listening to on the radio or on their computer. on YouTube later on, and they just weren't interested in hearing somebody actually perform live music with all the things that go with it. Suboptimal sound, maybe mistakes, maybe a style that you weren't interested in. Is it a blues band? Maybe you don't like blues and you only like some other kind of music. So most of the restaurants, most of the venues just stopped doing live music, and that decayed away to where it was just jukebox. It went back to jukebox music, and all of those performance opportunities disappeared. That was in the late 2000s. I moved to Las Vegas, and I was still able to do a little bit of performing for money, and I even did it in LA a little bit as time went on, but eventually I decided I needed to get out of the business because it was just too volatile. It was so hard to develop performance opportunities at that point compared to how it was before. People were so uninterested in hearing live music that it just wasn't worth it to pursue it compared to other options. And that's why I took up, for my main creative writing endeavor, I took up writing instead of live music performance, because I felt like I could finish a book and the book is done. I don't have to continually practice the book, and then I could just sell the book. Now, the publishing industry has had its own things happen over the last few years, which I've talked about in other videos and I could talk about elsewhere, but I mainly want to talk about the death of live music. So all of the like local stuff, that has gotten really hard. If you were around in the early 2000s, you don't know how easy it was compared to now. Things are really tough now. And the midline acts that were touring as support acts, they don't have a lot of label support. They used to get like $100,000 to record a record in the 90s. Crazy to believe, but they used to give out giant advances to bands, even bands that were mostly going to be touring support, because they could make money on it. People would buy the records. You could make money on it in the early 90s. Post Clear Channel, you start to lose support for midline bands because they don't get any radio play, which means they don't sell any records. Selling records was tied really heavily to radio play. So after about 1997, when the radio industry monopolized, your ability to be a kind of a little bit outside of the mainstream and still be successful started to get diminished as well. So what we have left are the big acts. These are the ones that are able to make money. And this is the ones that if it's going to be Taylor Swift, or it's going to be a legacy act like Metallica or the Eagles or Iron Maiden or the Rolling Stones is still out there playing. Yes, these legacy acts full of established musicians. Well, it turns out there's some cracks forming in a lot of that. There's been YouTube videos that have exposed the fact that Motley Crue does not perform their instruments live. You can see Nikki Sixx dropping his bass. The bass line is still coming out of the speakers. He's miming his parts. There's a YouTube channel that a couple of people have brought up in live streams, and I've actually seen some evaluations that this guy has done. I'll link it down below. The name of the channel is escaping me, but I know I have the video saved somewhere. And he has exposed that even the Eagles are lip syncing because their vocal delivery is precise night after night. It's exactly the same on two different nights. And that's just not possible with the natural variations of the human voice. You can be an expert opera singer. Every performance is going to sound a little bit different. And I can tell you from experience, as an experienced performer, you never perform the same way twice. That's the excitement of live music, is that it's different. Maybe the tempo's a little different. Maybe the tone's a little different. You might have a little drier voice one night and be a little more exuberant the next, and a little louder and a little more energetic. Like, everything's different when it's live. So the fact that you have the exact same vocal performance at the Eagles night after night means that they are lip syncing. They might be miming their guitar parts as well. There's huge use of backing tracks with established acts, whether it's backing vocals especially, or it's all of the instruments, like with Motley Crue. So what we've had happen is we've had live music really decay over time. The opportunities have disappeared for entry-level acts to get established and to develop some experience performing. Midline acts aren't able to make enough money to justify the expense of doing a tour. And so what you're left with are legacy big acts who are increasingly relying on faking it in order to get by. And that's a big scandal for people now. It goes way back. Milli Vanilli did it. The idea of putting a face on different music, that actually goes way back, all the way into like the 60s, where there were, manufactured pop bands like the Monkees and stuff like that. But what we have now is a question of, should you even bother to go see a concert? I think it's worth it to see a concert if you are okay with all of the things that go along with concerts. Because one of the things I realized that's developed over time, and maybe this is my last point, is that people, by being inundated with really highly polished digital recordings, that's their standard for what music should sound like. And when you perform live, it doesn't sound like that. It's not perfect. There's little edges, there's little mistakes, there's little variations that happen. The sound is usually suboptimal because you're going through PA. The guy who's mixing it is in one position. You're in a different place in the venue. Maybe you can't hear the guitar really clearly. So sound is always an issue when you're going. It's not going to be perfect unless you're like right by the sound guy. And even then, are you as deaf as the sound guy? A lot of these old sound guys, they're like deaf and they can't hear what's going on. So you have to have the same ears as the sound guy and be in the same place. I usually have to wear protection when I go to hearing protection when I go to a rock concert because it's too loud. It's gotten increasingly loud since the 1990s to the point where it'll damage your hearing. And because my hearing already has a lot of damage, I only have one ear that can properly hear. I have to protect that ear. I got to wear earmuffs or something at the venue, in which case that kills all the high end. I can't hear the music properly. It's almost no reason for me to go. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I don't go to live music anymore, is that it's too loud. It's too loud to be able to accurately hear the music and what they're performing on stage. So you have to be willing to deal with that. But I think people have had such a high standard that the Eagles maybe feel like they can't not mime. They can't go out there and kind of have a raspy voice and miss a note or sing a little bit flat. People will be like, well, they suck now. They suck now because I heard this. I heard somebody sing a flat note live. And the truth is, I've been there for that, right? It's the same thing with audiences over time because they only listen to the radio, and going to live music concerts becomes a less and less frequent thing. They're more and more comparing it to the recording. I remember going and seeing Black Sabbath live, and Tony Iommi improvises his solos. He comes from the blues and the jazz tradition where you improvise your solos. And people around me were complaining. They're like, that's not the solo from the record. He can't play the solo. It's like, it's an improvised solo. You wouldn't complain that Miles Davis is not playing the same notes from the record when you go see a Miles Davis concert, but they probably would, because they wouldn't understand that this was a thing that you played in the moment, and you're supposed to play it different every night. And Tony Iommi's been playing live for 60 years, and he knows what all these things are supposed to be. Other people don't know that. And in fact, I remember this. It was a Rick Beato interview with Wakeman from Yes, and he said that people were complaining to Chris Squire that he wasn't playing the right notes in some bass lick. And it was a solo that he played live. And so live, he played it in the studio, improvised it live. And then he went and played it live in front of people and also improvised it. And people were like, you're playing the wrong notes. And he's like, I had to go back and listen to the recording and learn these licks off the record, which we had just sort of spontaneously improvised. Because that's what people expected. The audience expected to hear note for note what they heard on the record. And I see that percolating through metal guitar solos now. Most of them sound like little technical exercises, little etudes, where they're playing like a sequence of arpeggios, and there's not a lot of expressiveness to it unless it's like Yngwie Malmsteen. And Yngwie gets criticized. He's not playing the notes from the record. He's just playing a bunch of random stuff. It's like Yngwie improvises everything. He's from the real tradition. That's why you go see Yngwie live. It's because you're going to hear stuff you've never heard before. It's different from what he played last night. It'll be different when he plays the next night. That's the way it's supposed to be. People don't have that. They grew up listening to records. They hear the same solo night after night. When they're listening to their Metallica record, they want Kirk Hammett to play it the exact same way. And when he improvises live, they complain. They say Kirk Hammett sucks. Well, I don't think that if Kirk Hammett sucks, that's not why he sucks. He doesn't suck because he's not playing the exact same solos that he improvised on the spot in 1986. Okay. But that's the standard. The standard is it's going to sound like this perfectly produced record when I go hear it live. There's a lot of effort put into producing and mixing and mastering an album. So when you go see it live, it's going to be a completely different experience. You can't make live sound be as good. Even with all your backing tracks, with all the extra crap that they throw in, it's not going to be as good. So I see why the legacy acts are just miming over recordings, is because people's standards are up here. They're not familiar with how live music's actually supposed to sound. the band maybe has gotten worse over the years. Maybe it's harder to sing those notes, and you don't want to disappoint the fans. They have that high expectation, and so you just end up miming it. I don't believe Nikki Sixx could just not play his bass parts, but there's probably just a fear that people are not going to like the show if there's mistakes and things, which happen with live performances. I think there's still big name bands that go out there and do it for real. I think the Rolling Stones does. I think Metallica does. Metallica has never shied away from having the mistakes be on the live recording, little variances of tempo, extra notes here, flub notes, sing a little flat here or there. They've never bothered to fix that. And so they continue on with just letting live music be live music, which is great. And I think there's a lot of other bands that still do it, but we're entering this era where I think you can't really expect a lot of big name acts to be good live performers. I remember Britney Spears, this is more than 20 years ago now, didn't really sing live. They had these really heavy backing tracks and she just wasn't really singing. She was dancing over her studio tracks. And that's what you would get at a concert. It's like a dance show. It's a visual show with a recording that you're familiar with and maybe some extra stuff thrown in, some talking in between, some crowd interaction, and that's what a live show is supposed to be. I have a higher standard than that, and I want things that are going to be a little bit different than that live, but I come from that older tradition. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think about live music? Do you still go to shows a lot? I'll reiterate that I have really had to take a step back from going to especially metal shows in order to protect my hearing. I'm getting to the point where, my hearing is really precious. I can't do what I want to do if I allow my hearing to get damaged. So that means that a lot of shows, there's no point in going to them. I can spend $50 to go to the show, but if I have to wear earmuffs, I can't really hear the music. So I have to just decide not to go in a lot of cases. It's not that I don't enjoy them or I don't wish to see live music or I don't believe that there's bands out there that are capable of impressing and entertaining me. There absolutely are. But in most cases, it's going to be too loud a show. I was really pleasantly surprised with a couple of metal shows that I went to a few years ago. One of them was Camelot. Great show. And I got to go back and meet the band, which was just a great experience. But it felt like sound reinforcement and everything was very balanced in the audience. And I was kind of sitting off to one side so the PAs weren't blasting me as hard and I could hear everything really clearly. Same thing with Sonata Arctica, who played before them. I could hear everything that they played really clearly. And when I saw Blind Guardian years before that, they were clear, but all the bands before them, they were like twice as loud as Blind Guardian. You couldn't hear anything you had to stuff your fingers in your ears and it was too much. So I've seen a couple of really good metal shows where I didn't have to wear like hearing protection, but half the time when I go to them, it's like you have to put an earplug in your ear or stuff your ears or wear earmuffs or something in order to enjoy a show, and that it kind of kills the sound for me. But anyway, I would love to have your thoughts on that as well. So give me your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the books down below. As I'm recording this, you can still get the Christmas collection up through the end of January. And I'll see you all next time. Have a great, great day.